Welcome back to MidPoint. Once again, welcome back from the Heritage Foundation, the Senior Research Fellow for Middle Eastern Affairs, James Phillips, and the Managing Director of Oceanic Advisors, J. Michael Waller. Jim, let me come to you now, and let's go ahead and look at something a little different here on all these different issues with Russia. Is it possible that the Russians, though, are getting involved in this because they're using us at this point to get back in the good graces of the world and to sort of smooth over things happening in the Ukraine, because people love to forget what's not in the news cycle every single minute?
I think that is a great danger, that not only will this obscure Russia's continued aggression in Ukraine, but also it could kind of give a happy feeling that Russia is, shoulder to shoulder with Western countries fighting against ISIS. But that really is not true. In Syria, Russia is boosting the Assad regime, which has turned a blind eye to ISIS because it sees ISIS as a useful foil that will deter Western support for more moderate Syrian rebel groups.
Then, James, at the end of the day, is this simply a bad idea for America?
I think it's a very risky idea. The Russians may have some anecdotal evidence or intelligence information that we don't already have, but I would greatly distrust what they pass along, because in the end they're playing with markedly different goals.
Michael, to you now, is this, again, I asked the same question, a bad idea for America, but let's put it in a different light now. The Russians now are putting nukes in Crimea. I mean, again, I hate to say this, but it seems like we're hearkening back again to the 60s. So is this a bad idea to get involved with a country doing everything we've talked about here and going right back to what basically in the 60s was called MAD, almost mutually assured destruction?
Well, we never left mutually assured destruction, so that's one thing. But, if we had an administration that we had faith in, I would think this would be a worthwhile thing to explore, because we could exploit Russian assets to our own advantage. Unfortunately, John Kerry and others don't inspire that kind of confidence to work with the Russians effectively, and I think they're going to be using us, and I think it's in the Russian interests to make sure that we have a strategic defeat in the Middle East, especially among Sunni Muslims and Arabs vis-a-vis Shia and the Iranians.
But let me also touch back again just a minute ago on something we mentioned in the last segment here, the fact that the Russians have better intelligence than America. Expand on that just a little bit, because that will astound people. I mean, Americans will once again say, what has happened to our intelligence gathering capability when we've got to rely not only on the Russians to take us into space, but now we have to rely on them to help us defeat terrorism. It's embarrassing and it's insulting in many ways.
Right. The U.S. intelligence community never recovered from the 1970s destruction of our human intelligence networks and capabilities. We never grew them back. And to the extent we have them, they've been for tactical operational purposes as opposed to your bigger picture strategic purposes. Conversely, the Russians have always excelled at human intelligence, and they maintain those networks. The KGB was not abolished. It was simply broken up into 5 units to make each of those units more efficient. And they have excelled at working with Arabs and Sunni Muslims to a wonderful degree, in addition to even the supreme leader of Iran, Khamenei, is a graduate of the Patrice Lumumba University in Russia, so they have a very long-term relations with these people, and their human intelligence networks are unsurpassed.
I got about 90 seconds. Let me see if I can get an answer from both of you on this. I wanted to spin quickly to the New York Times report talking about abandoned chemical weapons in Iraq. Roughly 5,000 chemical warheads, shells, or aviation bombs were apparently there, and the Pentagon tried to quiet this up. James, what's your take on this when you hear about this revelation?
Well, to me, it's very surprising that the Pentagon would kind of hush up this information, because it does support the Bush administration's argument that Saddam Hussein failed to destroy his chemical weapons as required by the ceasefire that ended the 1991 Gulf War and by many UN Security Council resolutions. Because the chemical weapons found were not later than 1991, it did not fully prove the Bush administration's claim that Iraq had never stopped building the weapons, but nevertheless, it would have been a great victory for U.S. foreign policy, and it's really puzzling why they would cover that up.
I got about 30 seconds here, Michael, to you. Is this affirmation that George Bush was in many ways correct?
Well, yeah, they had these, and I don't, if memory serves me right, and I'm not sure, I don't think this was a secret at the time, because this was not a new story today for me, having been involved in the Iraq issues back then, and not working at a classified level. We knew these things were being found, and I just think it was the mainstream media that was not reporting it to us.
Ah, the mainstream media once again. Why did I know that was going to walk into it one time or another? J. Michael Waller and James Phillips, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We'll look forward to the next time.
Thank you.
Later on this hour, what will it take to make an Ebola drug top of the list for American and international drug companies? And after the break, another knock at the American economy for failing to use all of our resources. MidPoint continues.